I still remember the summer the cold came to Maple Hollow. Not the kind that bit through your coat or turned breath into fog. No, this cold came in a box. A humming, white miracle on 4 short legs that made the whole town stop and stare. It was 1953, and most of us still kept our milk bottles in the creek behind the house. The water ran cold enough through the spring months, and if you wedged the bottles between the smooth rocks just right, they'd stay fresh for a day or two. By evening, you'd pull one out, dry it off with your apron, and hope the cream hadn't turned sour. That was just life, the rhythm we'd always known. Then one morning, Mr. Johnson, the grocer, rolled something through the front doors of his shop that looked like it had fallen out of a science fiction picture. It was square, metal, and gleamed brighter than a church window. Children pressed their noses to the glass, and men lifted their hats just to scratch their heads. Someone whispered that it was called a Frigidaire. The first time it hummed to life, the whole store went quiet. There was a steady sound, soft and low, like the sigh of wind behind a closed door. Then Mr. Johnson opened the door, and mist rolled out, real visible cold air, the kind you could almost touch. He reached inside and pulled out a bottle of milk so cold that condensation trickled down the glass. You could see your reflection in it. He smiled, poured a glass, and handed it to Mrs. Thompson, who'd been the first to wander in that morning. She took one sip and laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh that carried through the room. "It tastes fresh," she said, "like it came straight from the farm." Word spread faster than any headline. By afternoon, folks from all over town crowded into the store just to see it. It wasn't even plugged into our homes yet. Not many people could afford one, but somehow it felt like the future had arrived early. For the next few weeks, it became a kind of ritual. After church on Sundays, people stopped by to check on the machine, as they called it. Some said it looked like a jukebox without music. Others said it was too quiet to trust. But when the milk stayed cold and the butter no longer spoiled by noon, even the doubters leaned in a little closer. My mother was fascinated by it. She'd spent years boiling jars, salting meat, and fighting the summer heat with nothing but shade and faith. I remember her standing near the counter, staring at the gleaming door, her reflection caught in the chrome handle. "You could keep Sunday's leftovers till Thursday," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make the thought disappear. For her, it wasn't just convenience, it was possibility. No more running to the cellar, no more waste, no more rushing before food turned. It was time, precious, quiet time, given back to women who'd spent their lives racing the clock of decay. Mr. Johnson began keeping sodas in the new fridge. He charged a nickel a bottle, and the kids lined up just to taste that impossible chill. They'd drink slow, letting the fizz tickle their noses, pretending they were in the movies. I remember sitting outside the store one evening, the golden light spilling onto the street. The refrigerator hummed faintly from inside, steady as a heartbeat. And for the first time, our little town, still scarred by loss and rationing, felt like it was breathing again. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. If a box of cold air could make milk last, maybe we could last too. Maybe the world really was moving forward. That night, my mother turned to me before bed and said softly, "Remember this, Tommy, someday every home will have one." At the time, I didn't believe her, but she was right. That white humming box was the start of something. And none of us, not even Mr. Johnson, could have guessed how deeply it would change the way we lived, the way we gathered, and the way we remembered what home truly felt like. By the following summer, the miracle had multiplied. One by one, the white humming boxes began appearing in homes across Maple Hollow, first in the doctor's house, then at the mayor's, and finally in ours. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, delivered by two men in denim overalls who grunted as they carried it up our front steps. My mother stood in the doorway, wringing her hands on her apron like she was waiting for a guest of honor. The men set it in the corner of the kitchen where the icebox used to stand, a quiet little space that suddenly seemed much too small for such a magnificent thing. When they plugged it in, the hum filled the room. It was soft and low, but there was power in it, steady, unbothered, confident. My mother pressed her palm against the smooth door as though she were meeting a friend for the first time. The men explained the settings, the defrost switch, the shelves. She nodded politely, but her eyes never left that perfect surface. That night she filled it carefully. 1 jug of milk, a few jars of pickles, leftover chicken from supper. She lined everything up like soldiers on parade. Then she stood back, sighed, and whispered, "We'll see in the morning." The next day nothing had spoiled. Not a thing. For the first time in her life, my mother poured cold milk into a glass at breakfast and didn't have to sniff it first. The butter was firm, the leftovers fresh. My father, who'd always been skeptical of new gadgets, tasted the chicken and raised his eyebrows. "Still good," he said, almost grudgingly. "Guess it works." That small confirmation spread through the house like sunlight. Soon, our kitchen became a gathering place. Neighbors dropped by, just to have a look, and Mother would open the door like a magician, revealing her latest trick. Inside, the shelves gleamed. Eggs, cheese, a jar of jam that no longer had to be hidden in the cellar. It was ordinary, but it felt extraordinary, a quiet kind of progress that touched every corner of our lives. By autumn, nearly every family on our street had one. The town electrician joked that he could hear the hum of a dozen fridges just standing outside at night, like the sound of the future, he said. But it wasn't just the technology that changed us. It was what came with it. Suddenly, time slowed down. Meals weren't rushed. There was no panic to eat everything before it spoiled. My mother started saving small portions for later, something she'd never done before. "Tomorrow's dinner," she'd say with a little smile. Imagine that dinner tomorrow. Even the rhythm of the town shifted. The butcher stopped closing early. The grocer stocked new foods that could finally last. Butter, cream, and meat that didn't have to be salted or smoked. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was comfort. For the children, it was pure wonder. And just stand there, feeling the cool air brush our faces, glowing faintly in the dark. It felt like holding a piece of winter in the palm of your hand. My father, practical as always, saw things differently. "It's just a machine," he said. "Don't give it too much credit." But even he couldn't deny what it meant for my mother, the freedom it gave her, the way it softened her days. She used to spend hours canning fruit in the heat of July, sleeves rolled up, hair damp from the steam. Now she had time to rest, to read, even to sit with me by the porch when the evenings turned gold. One night she told me something I've never forgotten. "When your father went to war, I kept busy so I wouldn't have to think. When he came home, I kept busy so I wouldn't have to remember. But now—" She paused, looking at the glow of the refrigerator light. "Now I have time to feel again. That hum became part of our home's heartbeat. It filled the silence when the radio was off, a soft reminder that progress didn't have to be loud. It could be gentle, steady as the turning of a clock, patient as the thaw of spring. Sometimes on quiet afternoons my mother would polish its surface until it shone like new. She'd smile at her reflection and say, "See? We made it to the modern age." And though none of us could have known it then, she was right. That white humming box didn't just change what we ate, it changed how we lived. It brought ease where there had been effort and hope where there had been habit. But as with everything new, there were lessons to come, the kind that remind you that even progress has a cost, and that sometimes what we gain can quietly replace the things we never realized we'd miss. By the time I turned 17, every house on Maple Hollow's main street had its own white, humming heartbeat. The future had arrived, and it lived in every kitchen, humming, blowing, and quietly reshaping our lives. But with the comfort came something else, something no one could quite name. It started small, like a silence you didn't notice, until it had settled too deep to move. Before the refrigerators came, life followed the weather. Summers smelled of cellars and smokehouses, winters of canned peaches and dried apples. Food had rhythm. It belonged to the season, to patience, to care. You planned your meals around what nature offered, not what stayed good behind a door. Now things stayed good all the time. The urgency was gone. The rush of preserving, the shared laughter around boiling jars, the smell of vinegar and sugar in the air, gone too. My mother still hummed while she worked, but she worked less. The shelves in the cellar grew dusty. The fruit jars were lined up like old soldiers, waiting for a war that would never come. And though the house was quieter, cleaner, easier, a strange kind of emptiness began to take root, the kind that comes when life no longer needs all of you. It wasn't just at home. Down at Johnson's grocery, the crowds that once gathered each morning for fresh deliveries now came once a week, sometimes less. They didn't linger to talk about prices or the weather. They came with lists, efficient and quick. The chatter, the neighborly teasing, the simple joy of bumping into someone by the bread rack, all faded into the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. Even the air felt different. There was less scent of ripening fruit, less heat from ovens baking in a hurry before things spoiled. The refrigerator had stolen that urgency, that warmth that made every meal feel fleeting, precious. My father didn't seem to mind. He liked order, predictability, progress, he'd say, tapping the fridge door like a man patting the hood of a reliable car. Now your mother can rest, and you can study instead of chopping wood for the icebox. But one evening I caught her staring into the open fridge, the light washing over her face. She wasn't looking for food, just standing there, quiet, her reflection faint in the chrome. "You know," she said softly, "we used to talk more at dinner. Before all this cold. At first I didn't understand." She explained how, when food didn't last, you had to share, to give away what you couldn't eat, to visit neighbors, to trade jars and baskets. It forced people together. But now, with everything safe behind sealed doors, everyone had enough to stay apart. It struck me then. Progress had made us comfortable, but less connected. We'd gained convenience and lost conversation. The ice melted not in buckets, but between people. Still, life went on. I went off to college, and my mother wrote me letters about how the refrigerator was still running perfectly, like a loyal friend. She sent me slices of cold pie wrapped in wax paper, always signing off, "Keep your milk cold and your heart warm." When I came home for the holidays, the fridge was still there, the same soft hum, the same glow spilling onto the kitchen floor. But my mother looked smaller, her hands slower. She didn't rush around anymore. She didn't need to. She told me once that she missed the sound of jars sealing in the summer, the little pop they made when they cooled on the counter. Like applause from the house, she said. It was how she measured her day's worth. Now the only applause came from the low drone of a motor she couldn't turn off. It wasn't sadness, exactly. More like nostalgia stitched into the quiet. The refrigerator hadn't just kept food from spoiling. It had preserved a moment in time, the moment the old world ended and a new one began. Sometimes late at night I'd stand in front of it just like she once did, letting the light spill out, feeling that same cold on my skin. I understood then what she meant. The hum wasn't just sound. It was memory of everything that had changed and everything we'd lost without realizing. Still, she'd smile whenever I mentioned it. "Things change, Tommy," she'd say, "but that's how we move forward. Every generation finds its own kind of warmth." And she was right, of course. But even now, when I think of her kitchen, of that steady hum that became the soundtrack of my childhood, I can't help but wonder whether progress really gave us more, or just made us quieter. It was many years later, long after my parents had passed, long after Maple Hollow had traded its gravel roads for pavement, when I returned to the house where it all began. The kitchen looked smaller than I remembered. The wallpaper had faded into soft shades of yellow, and the curtains fluttered slightly from a window that no longer shut all the way. But in the corner, beneath the hum of years gone by, stood that same white refrigerator. It was older now, of course. The chrome handle had dulled, and the enamel bore the small scars of time, faint scratches, a chipped corner. But when I plugged it in, the hum returned, steady and faithful, as though it had been waiting all along. I stood there for a moment, just listening. The sound filled the room exactly as it used to. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, the same quiet reassurance that once wrapped around our lives like a blanket. Opening the door felt like opening a memory. The light flickered once before it steadied, spilling over empty shelves that still smelled faintly of metal and lemon polish. I ran my hand along the inside wall and could almost see my mother standing beside me, hair pinned back, apron dusted with flour, humming some forgotten tune. I sat down at the old kitchen table, the one my father built with his own hands, and let the hum keep me company. Outside I could hear the world rushing, cars, phones, lives that moved faster than we ever imagined. But inside that kitchen, time stood still. I thought about what the refrigerator had meant to us back then. To my mother it was freedom, the kind that came not from luxury, but from a few stolen hours of rest. To my father it was proof that the world was getting better, that his sacrifices had built something lasting. To me it had been a doorway to modern life, to change, to the future itself. And yet, sitting there, I realized something. The refrigerator hadn't really changed the world. People had. People who learned to adapt, to trust, to dream again after so much loss. The fridge was only the symbol, a reminder that even after the hardest winters, something could still hum with life. I looked around the kitchen. The shelves were empty now, but my memories filled every inch. My mother polishing the door until she could see her reflection, My father reading the newspaper beside the table, the sound of ice cubes cracking in a glass on a summer evening. I smiled softly. It was the echo of everything we'd overcome. The edges were frayed and her handwriting had faded, but the title still read clearly, Sunday Chicken, serve cold if it is too hot to cook. I laughed quietly, imagining her saying it, fanning herself in the July heat. I turned off the kitchen light, but the refrigerator's glow stayed soft and patient. It wasn't just a light inside a machine anymore. As I stood in the doorway, I whispered, "Thank you for keeping it all together." And in that still moment, I could almost hear my mother's voice again, calm, certain, full of love, saying what she told me so many years ago. "Someday, Tommy, every home will have one." She'd been right, of course. But what she didn't know was that long after the power fades and the house stands empty, the hum of those early miracles, the quiet ones that carried families through time, would still linger. It wasn't the cold that lasted. It was the warmth behind it. Before you go, take a moment to think about the world we built. How something as simple as a hum in the corner of a kitchen once represented hope, progress, and the promise of a better tomorrow. Stories like this remind us that real change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background, waiting to be noticed. It lives in the things our parents touched, in the lessons they left behind, and in the warmth that still lingers long after they're gone. If this story made you remember something, the sound of an old home, the glow of a light in the dark, or a small comfort that once meant the world, share it in the comments. Tell us what memories still hum in your heart. And if you believe these quiet stories deserve to live on, please like, share, and subscribe. Because every memory we keep alive is a light that never goes out.